Had you ever met his wife?
I may have.
Do you know what happened to his wife?
Yeah, I know she got killed. And yeah, I may have met her at a hospital.
Yeah. No, because I'm looking at the notes and these people are kind of, they're pointing the finger at you.
Well,
and
that's not ringing a bell to me, so...
And this is an incident where you showed up. You weren't supposed to show up. And things got heated.
At his house?
Yeah.
That just doesn't sound familiar.
Did you ever fight with her?
You mean like we fought?
Yeah. Did you ever duke it out with her?
No, I don't think so.
If you don't have your sofa seatbelt buckled up and ready to go on your sofa, go on and get it because you're going to need it for today's story. Okay. I just cannot with this story today, y'all. I was like, what do we do? Where do we go? How do we even jump into this? We need to start with what we know. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the damn sofa. That's the sofa. My name's Paul, and this is my shady sidekick, Roscoe. As y'all have seen, today we're going to be talking about a tale that literally will have you screaming, crying, laughing at her interview, all sorts of things. At the heart of it, though, is the monster, Stephanie Lazarus, and that is who we will be discussing. Now, Stephanie's interrogation would literally be something that if you sold tickets to it, would probably be a summer blockbuster, I'm not gonna lie. Once I saw the interrogation, I was like, I can't stop there. I read the book The Lazarus Files by Matthew McGowl. Now, he did a lot of research into this case. I'm gonna put the link for it down in the description below if you want to read it yourself. If you're into true crime stories, books, that kind of thing, you're going to want to read this one. I also went through plenty of articles, things of that nature. And so what I want to do for this video is I want to talk about the aspects of this case that really stood out to me, aspects of the interrogation that really stood out to me. Now, this case is even more bizarre, tragic, and to be quite frank, infuriating because of the dynamics surrounding it. Stephanie Lazarus was an LAPD officer for a long time. Now, she would have what we could say a complicated relationship with a gentleman by the name of John Rutten. Now, we're going to talk more about him in just a little bit. John would go on to marry a woman by the name of Sherri Rasmussen. Now, this did not go over very well with Miss Stephanie. And after a few confrontations, she would take the life of Sherri. But Stephanie would use her wits, her training, all of that kind of stuff that she learned from being a police officer to help her get away with this. And she would set the whole scene up, the whole situation up, to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. And she would get away with this for well over 20 years. Now, even though Sherri's parents and other people would be like, you need to look into this, ex-girlfriend of John's, this LAPD officer, that didn't seem to matter. That got pushed to the side, that got explained away. Now, here's the thing. Again, over 2 decades later, this all comes crashing down, right? And when it does, Stephanie is brought in for an interrogation by essentially co-workers. And this is the interrogation that I spoke of that is just like one of the most unique ones that I have ever seen. Stephanie doesn't know during this interrogation that she is actually the suspect, right? But once they get a few minutes into it, she's not dumb. She's been a cop for a long time, right? She catches on to this. But it's her reactions to this, her body's reactions, her facial expressions that just have us going, what am I watching? Now, I'm just going to go ahead and warn the damn Sofa Squad. I already told you to put your seatbelts on. The cringe is painful in this one. You can expect to see a lot of...
God, it's been a long time ago. God, that's been a million years ago.
Also, definitely a bunch of...
It's been a million years ago. I think I haven't talked to him in a long time. I couldn't even tell you when the last time I talked to him. Yeah, it's been so long ago. I don't understand why you're talking about some guy I dated a million years ago.
And a healthy sprinkling of this.
I have to check my pictures. In fact, I was just coming across some pictures that I just scanned. I take a lot of photos.
Now, before we get to this, or, even this, bless her heart, we need to talk about the background of the story. Now, let's start with the innocent person in this story, the victim, Sherri Rasmussen. Now, her, like many of these other victims that we see in these stories, right? And it's such a pattern, it's just so heartbreaking. She was this amazing human being, okay? Her time here on Earth was stolen way too soon. Sherri Rasmussen was born February 7th, 1957, and she had so much going for her. She was a daughter, she was a sister, she was a friend, she was a lover, she was a nurse, and really, she seemed like the type of person that anything she put her mind to, she was going to get it. She skipped grades. She graduated college super early. She was excelling at her career at a very young age. Now, one of the things that I personally learned from reading about her and researching her was this 5-year plan that she would do with her life. And not only was she just very meticulous about, living intentionally, I guess you could say, and saying, this is where I want to be in 5 years. We're going to revisit it. This is how we get there. Because it really kind of reiterated this whole thing of if you chip away at a goal bit by bit and look at where you've been, you're going to get where you want to go. And I really took that away from her. She just seemed like such an awesome person. Now, this drive of hers would take her all the way to being the director of nursing at the Glendale Adventist Medical Center. Now, this dynamic of Sherri, this drive that could make it seem to others like success was like her natural just state of being, right? This seems like it was something that really attracted John Rutten to her. He seemed like that drive, that success, probably the energy that she had around her was very attractive and appealing to him. Sherri's parents' names are Nels and Loretta Rasmussen. Now, her father was a very successful dentist, and her mother was a very successful office manager. She helped run his practices for him. And so together they worked as a team, and they did quite well. Now, before we get into more of the dynamics of like Sherri and John, we first need to also talk about John and Stephanie. So John was a mechanical engineering student at UCLA, and this is where he would meet Stephanie Lazarus. Now, she was studying political science at UCLA. Now, these two, essentially, they had a lot in common, right? They were both athletic. They were both really super into fitness, sports. They sounded like very competitive type people to me. Now, all that being said, their relationship, the dynamics of their friendship, was probably, one could say, unconventional, kind of odd, and even Stephanie will mention this in her interrogation.
What ended the relationship between you and John?
It was kind of a weird relationship. I mean, we dated. I can't say that he was my boyfriend. I don't know that he would consider me his girlfriend.
John and Sherri weren't really officially an item in college, or ever for that matter, but they were doing stuff together, right? Now, a lot of people kind of describe the scenario between her and John in college is like, it seemed like Stephanie wanted more from him, but he didn't. And I think you could say that this feeling extended to the rest of their time together, right? But they would do stuff in school, right? They would go to games together. They would watch each other in their, sports stuff, and all that kind of thing. To me, it sounded like she was a tomboy, and had that kind of chummy dynamic with guys or whatever, but maybe wanted to be more with this specific guy. Now, also that being said, it seems to me that John kind of kept her as like a back burner type person. Now, on the stand, he would even say, he was like, yeah, I never considered her like a girlfriend. We weren't an item. And in fact, we weren't even romantically like doing anything in college, right? Basically, he just described some like heavy makeout sessions or whatever. Now, after college, that would change. That would turn into, more of a romantic relationship that would deepen. But again, it didn't really deepen the feelings. It was more like they just started hooking up. Now, at this point, she sounded more like a friend with benefits, right? At least coming from John. Now, she would even like go to trips to his home, whatever. She knew his family. And also, it would come out in court, he never introduced her as a girlfriend in those situations. So, to me, again, it sounds like she was a hookup. It sounds like she was a back burner. It sounds like John was never going to really want to make her wifey. Like, she was just kind of like a chummy tomboy friend with benefits to, serve his needs for certain things or whatever, and there was going to always be some other woman that would take the place of wifey, who would end up being Sherri. Now, this whole thing about when John was in court testifying about like, well, no, she's not really my girlfriend, I was like, I bet that chapped her ass. Now, after they graduated, as we know by now, Stephanie would go and apply to police academy, where this would be her career, right? John would get a job as an electrical engineer, and they kind of just started doing their own thing. And this dynamic, this way things were going for them, this seems like it was going to be the closest situation to like a relationship that she was ever going to be able to have with John, whether she wanted to or not. But then when someone else came along, that would even take that away, and that person's name was Sherri. So let's talk a bit more now about Sherri and John and that dynamic between them. Now, for John, it was love at first sight when he met Sherri at a party in 1984. And like I said, aside from her being a beautiful young woman, she was a successful, driven person, and that was something that was like really attractive to John. Now, they would quickly become a couple, and they didn't waste much time at getting into marriage, which would be on November 23rd, 1985. Now, it did sound like along the way that there were some peculiar type behaviors that would maybe raise an eyebrow, especially maybe with people who knew her, her parents, friends, things like that. So, first of all, instead of getting like an engagement ring and doing all that, they got a BMW. Now, to each their own. I'm not trying to say like, oh, this or that or whatever. But the thing that was kind of odd with it is Sherri, number one, had a Toyota that was, had I think less than 10,000 miles on it or something. To me, she doesn't seem like the type person that would be like, oh, I'm going to make a decision based on, I want a fancy BMW, right? She was going to be more mature, no, this is a Toyota. It lasts a long time. We're paying this off, to that kind of thing, right? So the BMW thing and having like 2 car payments and yada, 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 it seemed more like a John idea, right? So there was that. Now let's talk a little bit about John here for a minute. So John had seemed to be very insecure about being accepted by her family, right? Especially by Nels, the father. Remember, he was a dentist, he's very successful, all this stuff. So he would do a couple of like kind of odd things. I'm going to list some examples here that I read in the book that I was just like, God, this is so cringy. So one example that Matthew cited in his book, The Lazarus Files, is at Christmas time, at one point, John had shown Nels a picture of Sherri in a bathing suit, and John was basically like, who wouldn't want to see that's his wife? And again, it's kind of like, that's her dad, you know what I'm saying? Like, why would you do that? Then there was this other example about, they were like videotaping the Christmas or whatever, and this is actually on video where John was talking to the 4-month-old niece and essentially like pretending to have a conversation with her about, him being liked by the family and stuff like that. It was almost like he was projecting his insecurities onto this conversation, knowing that people could hear, and it just felt really gross, right? So there's just kind of this awkward behavior, like this very, I'm insecure, I might have low self-esteem, that kind of thing. I'm really super extra about being accepted, yada, yada, yada. And it just, it is what it is. But again, this is who Sherri loved, right? This is going to be fine. This is who our daughter loves. We're going to accept it. We're going to go with it, yada, yada, yada. So, it is what it is, and it sounds like it's an unfortunate way that things played out in the sense that he couldn't just be cool with it. But we'll get to more of my thoughts on him here in a little bit. Now, all these things about, young love, marital bliss, Christmases together, this is all nice and wonderful and how things should be. Except in this situation, it left somebody out that was not happy about that. And that somebody, as you probably know, is Stephanie Lazarus. So when Stephanie found out about John's engagement to Sherri, she was depressed, she was sad, she was, not cool with us. Now, Stephanie had a roommate at the time, I believe his name was Mark, and he would say, I never saw, like, John picking her up, like, normal relationship stuff going on, right? He never really saw that, but Stephanie would basically be like, that's my man, I'm in a love triangle. One thing that's very prevalent is Stephanie thought she was in a love triangle, right? Ain't nobody else in the triangle know they were in the triangle except for Stephanie. Now, another example that was cited, like in the trial, on the stand, in the book, on the articles and stuff, is at one point when all this went down, she finds out about the engagement, yada yada, and she has John come over, or they get together. She basically lines things up to create a one last chance type situation. She confesses her love to him, and obviously he's kind of like, sorry girl, but she basically convinces him to sleep with her one last time, right? Now this is like before the marriage, after the engagement, that type of thing. So she convinces him to sleep with her one last time. Now John will say that he was basically like, well, I thought maybe it would give her closure, and maybe make things better. And I'm like, we obviously can surmise at this point Stephanie was probably thinking, this will get him, this will convince him that he wants to keep coming back for these cookies. But in fact, it wouldn't keep him coming back for the cookies at all, right? He was like, no thank you. And in fact, what it would do is it would open the door to Crazy Town. And let me tell you what, Stephanie was the damn mayor. Now, to understand her, the way she is, the way she thinks, all this stuff, we need to also talk about what she was like as an officer, because I was like, yeah, honey, you're giving cops a bad name. So Stephanie would work her way through her police training. She would make the ranks and all that kind of stuff. But she would start off at the Hollywood beat. Now, to me, this sounded like the kind of place where you were like putting your time in, paying your dues, that kind of thing. It sounded like a rough beat. It sounded like she worked a rough shift. And you're kind of seeing it all, right? That type of situation. Now, she was also coming in at a time that was like the after effects of basically LAPD trying to make themselves more diverse, more inclusive, bringing women officers in, that kind of a thing. So she was doing what she was doing during a time where there was going to already kind of be like an uphill battle, if you will. So I'll give her that. Now, Stephanie was also very active on the force. Like, to me, I would describe her as like a cop's cop, right? Like, she kind of knew how to schmooze, if you will. She was like, if there was a sports team, she was going to do it. She was going to, start this thing over here and do this. And she was just that kind of, she brought that energy to the whole situation. So again, by doing that, this would enable her to, get opportunities to come her way. Now, during the beginning of this whole situation of her, getting on the force, yada yada, she and John were still, they're doing this hookup kind of a thing where he might come watch her play some games and da-da-da. So all that's going on. Now, the Sherri situation is coming, right? It's looming out there in the future, but that's where this whole gray zone is for Stephanie, in my opinion. Now, what will happen with Stephanie also is then about after a year of doing the whole Hollywood beat thing, she would get onto another beat, whatever you want to call it, at Club Dev. Now, this sounds literally like a night and day situation, right? To the one she was at. Like, this sounds like, oh my God, there's someone jaywalking. We'll mosey on down there and get to it later, right? It sounds like it was just like a pushing paper, that kind of a situation. Now, one thing that Stephanie would do that kind of blows my mind, but in a sense it also really shed light into things, is she would keep like a daily journal, a daily diary, that kind of a situation. And she would talk about like, basic stuff that happened at work. But what it did, for me at least, is it showed us how she viewed being a police officer, how she viewed her job, other people, that kind of a thing. So as this whole situation with John was trying to go down, she did make a few entries in her diary that were like, okay. So on June 4th, she did write about how John was getting married. She noted that it was really bad, that her concentration was like a -10. Now, soon thereafter, she would also write that she really didn't feel like working. She was stressed out about John, and she ended up asking for time off. Now, we'll get back to some more of that in a minute. Now, other stuff she would write wasn't so much like, piecing the puzzle together in regards to John or whatever, but it was like insight into how she viewed her job, right? To me, I got this feeling of her just kind of being a very entitled person, somebody who viewed her position as an officer as giving her like privilege over others, entitlement, that kind of thing. Now, some examples that were noted in there, like one was about she had received a call about a child abuse call or something, and so on her way she was flagged down by an officer working, like, it sounds like a movie or something. So she goes in, and she even noted in her journal about, like, oh, they were serving, I got free orange juice and da-da-da, and then the call ended up being canceled. And I'm kind of like, hey, I wouldn't really write that in any kind of a place that could be read, but whatever. Not that she was thinking it would be read, but still, I'm like, the fact that she felt comfortable enough to put that there and to do it, number 2. Now, another thing that was cited in that book, The Lazarus Files, and this one I was like, okay, this is, like, that to me is like criminal, and just shows that this, I'm like, really? You just took your time on a child abuse call? Are you serious? Okay. This next thing is like, whoa, that's creepy. So at one point, Stephanie had this personal trainer. And so the way it goes in the book is he was at home, he had just, partaked in the ganja. And there's a knock on his door, and he opens it up, and it's 2 female officers, Stephanie and another officer. Well, you can imagine he was like, Now, I do think that he was like, at first, like, hey, maybe I want to get a little freaky, or something, but that's not the way it was going. But basically, it was clear, first of all, he was like, I've never given Stephanie my address. Like, it was clear she looked it up and whatever she did or whatever. He never invited her over. She literally just looked his address up and they just showed up over there. Now, like I said earlier, because Stephanie was really good at this good old boy system, she worked so many different things. Like, she was in the DARE program, internal affairs, numerous different divisions of the police officer, in the LAPD and whatnot. Now, when this whole thing went down where, the cookie came crumbling down, all that, and she was called, she was working art thefts. Now, that is particular because it's very public and you're typically going to be dealing with, like, rich people or situations, right? So there's going to be, like, publicity around that kind of a thing. So that's what she was working at the time of the interrogation. Now, she also would always be receiving these, like, accolades and stuff like that, but to me it was almost like trophy, or what do you call it, participation awards. It was like stuff within the department, but it wasn't like, wow, she was on her way to work and stopped and rescued a kitten on her own free time. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't anything like that. It was like, Stephanie takes really good notes, things of that nature. So again, I just felt like she was a bully, right? I felt like she was a bully as a police officer, and that she looked down on others, that she used her position as that. I mean, she would basically just drive around, visit friends, run errands, do all this kind of stuff. So it's almost like after she did that whole year in Hollywood, her next stop was, I'm kicking my feet up and I am taking it easy. And I think all of that plays into the things that she did when she began stalking Sherri. And on that note, let's talk about a few incidents that went down in regards to stalking Sherri that I was like, these are pivotal, these are scary, these are traumatizing, oh my God. So Sherri was being stalked by Stephanie, right? And so, like, she would see, Stephanie at the grocery store, Stephanie at the gym. Stephanie was like showing up in random places where Sherri was at. Now, Sherri would also tell her father at one point, she would say, I'm being followed by somebody who dresses like a boy, but they have these eyes that, like, are beady and penetrating and look right through you. Now, when she said that, I was like, Jay, who could that be? So let's talk about the condo that they lived at. So first of all, Sherri had this condo, right? She had originally lived in it with a roommate, I believe her name was Jane, and this is where they lived, yada yada yada. Sherri's parents had gotten it for her, that kind of a thing, yada yada yada. So when John comes along or whatever, her roommate's gonna move out, John moves in, all this kind of stuff, and eventually what will take place is the father will deed it over to Sherri and John, so it's their condo, right? So there's that. And I just mentioned that because I guess to me what we're about to talk about is so bizarre, but also to me I'm just like, this isn't even like it was John's long-term place. So for Stephanie to even do this, which is completely wrong anyways, it's even that more brazen because I'm like, yeah, this is more, I look at this more as Sherri's home, right? Than Sherri and John's. Like, Sherri had been living there. So the fact that Stephanie even felt more comfortable to show up at the place doing these things. I was like, yeah, this is absolutely not cool. So at one point, Stephanie shows up over at Sherri and John's condo, and Stephanie has these snow skis with her, and she's basically asking John to wax them. And you can imagine, right, that Sherri was like, are you kidding me? Well, John agrees to, right? I'm trying to hold my opinions on some of the stuff with him and the dynamic between Stephanie, but we're going to have to sprinkle it throughout. So you can imagine Sherri was not happy about this, right? And so there's that. That's weird enough. Stephanie then comes back to get them later or whatever. Now, here's my thing. So sofa sidebar, okay? The fact that that even took place and was an option, I'm like, are you kidding? I would have been so PO'd if I was Sherri. And she was, right? It also really angers me at John because I'm like, why would you even do that? Why would you even entertain that? You know, that is so unhinged on Stephanie's part. Why would you even entertain that to this woman who you're about to marry, who is so, in my opinion, out of John's league, in my opinion, way beyond what Stephanie could ever hope to be as a partner to John, right? And so I'm like, why would you even do that? It's like, kick rocks and get out of here and don't come back. But now also there was this whole thing with security at the complex where it's like, how, you know, is she abusing her badge to get in? Like, what is she doing? Like, it's all sorts of level of creepy. But it gets worse, okay? So let's talk about the hospital confrontation. So there's a day where a woman shows up at the hospital that Sherri works at, and the woman is Stephanie. And apparently Stephanie shows up in very skimpy clothing. And I mean, let's just go ahead and call it what it is. She was dressed slutty. She was dressed like a tart. So remember earlier how I talked about when, you know, Stephanie found out about the engagement and she was like asking John to come over, and that's where she was like, baby, I love you. I'm putting it all on the line. I'm offering my womanhood to you one more time. Please take it. Okay, so like, remember that whole cringy thing, right? So then after, you know, he took the goods, right? She goes to the hospital where Sherri's working a couple of days later, dressed like a tart. We already covered that. And basically tells Sherri, look, I just had your man. And you know what? If your marriage doesn't work out, I'm going to be waiting right here to pick up the pieces. You know, now remember this when we get into the interrogation and she's all like, was her name Sherri? I think, did she work at a hospital? I can't remember. Okay, because it's going to become prevalent. So you can imagine poor Sherri is crushed by this, right? I mean, this goes on, like, it's traumatizing enough to have some ex-girlfriend who's been harassing you show up and say, I just had your man. So, but Sherri was a decent person. She was good, and she forgave John. She told him about it. He's like, look, oh my God, I messed up, da-da-da, please, I don't want our marriage to end, yada yada. She didn't, you know, she was gonna stick with him. So they make it past that. Now, a couple of months before the main incident where Sherri would lose her life, another even creepier thing happened where Sherri's at home and all of a sudden Stephanie's in the living room. And Stephanie's like, oh, I'm waiting on John or whatever. And Sherri's like, you got to go. And I mean, at that point, this is where you can tell where I'm like, oh yeah, whether Sherri claims or it seems or whatever that she was in some kind of love triangle. And here's the thing, maybe John was leading her on to that. We don't 100% know. I mean, you can sit here all day long and say, I never considered somebody a girlfriend and da-da-da. But I'm also like, well, when she showed up to your house to do the skis, you let her do that. You rolled around with her one last time, you know, to make her feel better. So there's something there, right? And so Sherri wasn't, and I mean, Sherri found herself in the love triangle, but she was the complete innocent bystander to this. And I do feel like John kind of, you know, whether he meant to or not, was playing both of them, and obviously we see how that ended. Now, Sherri was expressing concerns to people. She was talking to her father about this and whatnot, but remember, Sherri is somebody who, you know, this is what I'm doing, this is how it's going to go, you know, boom, 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 boom. She wasn't wanting to burden people with other stuff. She was going to handle it. You know, and she was like, from what I understand, like, you know what, look, let me just do A, B, and C, we'll revisit, you know, that kind of a thing, but I got this, you know, kind of a thing. And from what I've read of her and learned of her through this story, one would probably believe that. You know, she just seemed like the type of woman that was like, this is what I want, this is how it's going to happen, and I know how to make that happen. So I would personally trust her if she said, you know what, I've got this. You know, I would have no reason not to. But again, a lot of times most people don't know when someone is as crazy as Stephanie. Like, you aren't expecting that, right? Like, how many of us would be expecting someone to take it to that level? That's very out of the blue. So let's talk about a more sensitive dynamic of this case. Let's talk about the day that Sherri's life was stolen. Now, this day is February 24th, 1986. Sadly, Sherri would call out of work that day. She called out of work, she stayed home, and so she's at home, and John's trying to contact her all day long, right? And she's not answering, there's nothing going on, whatever, which is odd, right? So he comes home from work, after work, and major red flags up, right? There's like definitely things are not right. First of all, her BMW is missing. There's like broken glass in the garage. When John does make his way inside, he will unfortunately find his wife Sherri lifeless in the living room floor. Now, later, a housekeeper would say that she had heard like a couple of loud thuds and then a scream at some point during the daytime. And then things kind of went quiet. Now, it was very clear that a major struggle had gone on, right? There was stuff broken, things of this nature. There was stereo equipment stacked up near Sherri. Now, Sherri also had a lot of wounds. First of all, she had been shot 3 times. She had blunt force trauma. She had a horrifying bite mark on her arm. We'll talk about that later. So a major struggle took place. All of this stuff. Now, this is half of the problem here when it came time for the investigation, is that it looked like a robbery with the stereo, the car missing. Now, the only things that were actually missing from this scene is the BMW, which was the equivalent of an engagement ring for her, and their marriage license. That is completely bizarre. Now, the reactions to this are, of course, what you would expect. You know, people are heartbroken, they're shocked. John, being the husband, of course, he's going to be looked into, interviewed. I mean, found her body, for God's sakes. You know, and there's like conflicting stories that will come out on the stand, you know, in my research and whatnot, as to exactly when he started saying Stephanie's name. But John will testify that it was within a couple of days. He's saying that, you know, ex-girlfriend, LAPD officer Stephanie, you need to look at her, yada, yada. And the parents will say this as well, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Now, the day that this went down, there's like this chain of events, and the parents are kind of scratching their heads a little bit because, first of all, they weren't notified by John that this went down. It was hours later that John's parents notified them. Now, John will say, well, I was being interviewed, all the craziness, yada, yada. But it seems to me like it set this tone for this vibe that went on between her parents, his parents, and him, the whole 9 yards. There's almost this energy of like his parents wanting to protect him from Nels, but Nels wasn't like trying to hurt him. So it was this very weird energy. Now, Nels to this day says, you know, no, I do not believe that he had anything to do with it. I just believe that he wasn't that forthright coming and some of the stuff that was going on. Sleeping with Stephanie, so on and so forth. Overall, this dynamic, and this is my opinion, I'm going off speculation street. Reading this, learning about Sherri, learning about John, the dynamics, I just feel like John was in over his head. And what I mean by that is I think Sherri was out of his league. I think John was aware of that. I think he was also aware that, you know, I don't think he had anything to do with it, but I think he was also aware of the feeling of, he knew inadvertently, almost like this, like, I'm a crappy boyfriend, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was letting Stephanie linger around, keeping that going. This could possibly be something. There was this level of guilt with it. And it could even be just a level of guilt, say that wasn't it, of I should have been home to protect her, which, I mean, you can't control that. Like, you know what I'm saying? You have no idea someone's going to do this. So there just seemed to be this level of that. Now, maybe he also was afraid that it was going to come out that he had had this affair. You know, there's really 100% no telling, but it's just kind of the energy that I I get from it. Some of Sherri's friends will even say in interviews and whatnot where they're like, you know what, it just, knowing Sherri, if this had happened to John, if the tables were reversed, she would have been advocating for him, banging on doors, we want answers, what is going on? And they said they just felt like John kind of eventually just faded away. He wasn't knocking the cops' doors down for answers. A man by the name of Lyle Mayer would be the lead detective on this case. And right off the rip, okay, it was decided this is a robbery gone wrong. The two men, two male suspects is usually what it is, but two suspects or whatever did this. There was some huge, long, drawn out fight in here, and that's what it was. Now, it did not help the situation that I think within 10 days, there was another robbery on the same street, woman held at gunpoint by two men. I mean, come on, right? So basically that was the MO, nope, that's what's going on. Now again, like I said, both John and the parents will adamantly say, right off the rip, we were telling him about Stephanie Lazarus, right off the rip. That we were telling him about them, but the parents at that time didn't know Stephanie's name. They just knew an ex-LAPD officer. Obviously, John would know Stephanie's name. Now, Mr. Mayer will say, John never brought up her name, and the parents never did either, and the only one it was brought up was months into the investigation. Now, both John and the parents will say, we were brushed off. We were told we're watching too much TV, yada, yada, yada. We were brushed off when we were throwing, the whole ex-girlfriend LAPD officer, Stephanie, that whole option. They just weren't taken seriously. Now, there would be a reward amount eventually put up for this. It was in the amount of, I believe, $10,000. But even when that press release went out, it was geared towards this crime where two men broke into a home. So it's almost like this bias just permeated everything about the case. So when everybody's mind is going that way, except for some people behind the scenes that were very privy and just well, hold on a second, this situation's been going on over here, and that's not good. Shouldn't we be looking into this? Now, remember how I said Stephanie did those journals and diaries? During that time, remember I said she made some things about, I can't concentrate, yada, yada. But when she went back to work, which was February 25th, so that is completely suspect, basically she's it was a boring day at work, and, nothing really out there. There was never anything in her journals that was this, I'm hiding some horrible secret, or I did this horrible thing, or whatever, right? And so that part's just kind of chilling to me, that it's okay, you take time off work, there is some evidence of how you're feeling over this man, but then you're just right back in the saddle. Now, also another thing that would end up coming out, but not till way later and looked at, and again, one thing that's frustrating with this case is a lot of this information was clearly there, right? It was just seemingly chosen not to be looked at. So, and we probably will never get answers at this point as to how much of a cover-up there was or how much of turning a blind eye. 13 days after this went down, Stephanie Lazarus reported her backup gun, a .38 revolver, as being stolen to the Santa Monica Police Department. Now, this is alarming in a couple of ways. First of all, an officer is supposed to let their people know, my gun's missing, whatever. This is her, personal, backup gun or whatever. Nonetheless, she didn't say anything about it. Totally suspect. And we'll hear about this here in a few minutes when we watch the interrogation, right? So, but doesn't report it to her own, department or whatever. Now, .38 revolver, they would end up figuring out that this is the type of weapon that was used to take Sherri's life. Now, many people who had relevant information would just say, we were never interviewed, we were never talked to, right? So many of these cases that we see, these cold cases, days turn to weeks, weeks turn to months, months turn to years, and in this one, years turn into decades. And nothing comes of it, no more information, not a day or minute closer to finding out who did this to Sherri. Now, another dynamic that I found interesting as time moved on from this case is that in 1989, John reunited with Stephanie, and so he would hook up with her again. Now, one of the things that went on with this, I do have some opinions about this, but before he met up with her, in Hawaii, I believe it was, he consulted with the investigators, whatever, and he just wanted to make sure, look, she has nothing to do with this. She was never a suspect, whatever. Nope, not at all. Yada, yada, yada. So here's my thing with that, is I'm just if you felt that you even needed to ask that, Like, why would you even do that? You know what I'm saying? So, and again, that's just my opinion. I mean, I know I'm kind of casting judgment on someone for their actions for that, but it just seems in very bad taste. But also what an event like that tells us is that if all that's true, and, you know, he reached out to Lyle Mayer and was like, is she a suspect? You know, nope, and not at all. Then, you know, that tells us, okay, so years after, you know, what, 89, so a few years after, she wasn't even on the radar. And her name was brought up again, you know, but again, this is all if this is all true. Now, even though this, like, you know, rendezvous, whatever, this would not be a long-term thing, as usual with these two. And John would end up getting married, having a family, and Stephanie would end up marrying actually a fellow cop. His name was Scott, and she would end up actually adopting a daughter. They would adopt a daughter. But then one day, things changed. In 2001, LA Police Chief Bernard C. Parks X, he created the Cold Case Homicide Unit, and they began going through unsolved files for DNA evidence. Now, a criminalist in that department named Jennifer Francis, she began going through Sherri's file, and she found some interesting things in this. So remember the bite mark that I told you about on Sherri's arm? Well, there was a swab that was taken from that, and Jennifer realizes, wait, where is the swab, right? So she starts going and doing her own little investigation. And this is one of those things where you would have to literally just read it to see how much of a lightning strike this was that she was able to find the swab, right? But essentially she's researching, she's going, you know, she knows it should be here, They finally figure out that it had been left in the coroner's freezer for 18 years. Okay, so just blows my mind that even happened. But that's one of those things where I'm like, yep, Sherri, this is where I love how situations like this, the victim is yelling from their grave, right? They're like, this person's not going to get away with this. And Sherri was fighting so hard to make sure that Stephanie would come to justice eventually. So by 2005, they get the results back from this DNA, the swab from the bite mark. So they get it back, and it comes back that it's female DNA. Now remember, this whole time, this is, we've had two, you know, male perps, this is the whole case, but this blows that out of the water, right? So Jennifer takes this back to the powers that be and goes over it, and she's brushed off. And it's, oh, well, one of the robbers could have been a woman, and And so all this stuff goes back to storage. But again, Sherri was speaking from the grave. She was not going to let this go by. By 2009, everything would start to come crashing down, and the truth would finally begin to rise from the ashes. So 2009, shockingly, you know, thankfully, the homicide unit at LAPD, I guess it was slow. There wasn't that many, you know, what's that year, whatever. So the detectives and stuff are going through like cold cases, yada, yada. Well, lo and behold, Sherri's is one of those cases. And so some fresh eyes get onto this case file. And they're looking through this, and they're seeing, first off, right off the rip, like the same stuff that Jennifer had pointed out years before, where they're like, okay, hello, this DNA on a bite mark matches, or, you know, is female, and this whole theory is these are two guys that did this. This isn't right. Now, the detective that was looking through this, his name was Jim Nuttall, and he's looking through this, and again, he's making these conclusions that Jennifer did, but she was brushed off for, and he's going, it's making him go deeper and deeper, and things are not adding up. Now, lo and behold, guess whose name is all over this but Stephanie Lazarus. And so finally, someone starts looking at her name with some seriousness, and they go back to John and, you know, start re-interviewing people and whatnot, and John's like, oh no, yeah, that's my ex-girlfriend. She didn't do it. Nope, she didn't do it. We already checked her out. She didn't do it. Again, they're looking into this, and more things are pointing towards like, well, we need to look at Stephanie. Stephanie worked across the hall from these guys. So you can imagine how tricky they had to be investigating this, right? So they're doing all this. So they finally get to the point where they're like, look, we need to do the DNA stuff, right? So the investigators have to devise a way to get DNA from her. They want to find out where she's living, but even with that, they're like, she's been very slippery about even figuring out where she lives with her address. And so through this, they figure out, wait, she's dating, she's married to Scott over here. This whole 9 yards. This all starts coming out, and it's almost too small of a world, too bizarre. It's like, could this even be true? Well, what they do is they start staking her out and following her around and all this stuff. And one day, her and her little girl go to Costco. They eat something while they're there, and Stephanie throws away a cup with a straw. And so they go and they get it out of the garbage, and they send it off to be tested for the DNA. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple of $100 if you guessed what it was. It was a match for 200, Alex. Bing, 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 bing. And so with that being said, this draws us to a part of the video that damn near took me out. The interrogation. So the detectives have gone to Stephanie, and they were like, hey, look, we just arrested this bozo, and he's, giving out some information about your art thievery cases. We need you to come down to the jail. And so she's like, yeah, man, yeah, bro, okay, bro, yeah, sure, bro. And so she's going to go to the jail with him, and they did this so that she would get rid of her gun, because, this girl, she cray, okay? You can just look at her eyes. So they go to the jail. She has to, unweaponize herself or whatever, put her gun out, whatever you call it, to go in. And this is kind of where this video picks up, right? And so she comes in, and they sit her down, and she's in this frame of mind of she's getting ready to interview someone about one of her cases. But then they start asking her questions about John Rutten and from her past or whatever, and it's very confusing to her, but you can start to see where she pieces it all together of, I might be in trouble. So what we're going to do is we're going to view some clips from the interrogation. I'm going to be offering some thoughts, some opinions, some commentary on them. Now you're going to see there's a lot of go-tos that she has in this. First of all, everything's a million years ago. Secondly, she loves pictures. Thirdly, she has this very selective memory about certain things. And fourthly, she is insanely obviously guilty and cannot hide it, and it's like every muscle in her face tells on her.
Do you know John Rutten?
John Rutten?
Rutten.
Oh yeah, I went to school with him.
You did?
Yeah.
How long did you know him?
Gosh, I went to school in, let's see, went to UCLA in 1978 I started, and, met him at school at the dorms.
Were you guys friends, close friends?
Yeah, we were very close friends. What's this all about?
Now at this point, I'm sure she was like, what? A part of me wants to wonder if she was like, well, did something happen to him or whatever? Because remember, she's expecting some criminal to come in and talk to her about art thieves or information or whatever. So there's a part of me that wonders, like, was she thinking something happened to John? Because I do think that she's so cocky that this was like, oh, honey, I got away with that. We don't even think about it anymore. You know what I'm saying? So, but I do wonder, like, at what point this all started to come together for her.
Okay. Were you guys just friends or anything else? Or?
Yeah, we were good friends.
Yeah. Was there ever any relationship or anything that developed between you guys?
Yeah, we dated. What's this all about?
Now in this part, it was killing her where she's just like, yeah, we dated. I met his parents. He never said I was his girlfriend. He made sure never to do things like go to the grocery store, out to dinner, because he was afraid I might actually like him or something like that. But, in my world, I was special to him. Okay. Now, for real though, she has to be thinking at this point, like, what's up? Why are they asking me about, like, have we dated? All this type of stuff. And one would hope that she had gotten over whatever obsessiveness she had over this man back then. But do you ever, when you take it to the point of taking the life of someone's spouse, partner, whatever, do you ever get past that?
Well, it's relating to his wife.
Okay.
Did you know her?
Not really. I knew that he got married years ago.
Did you ever meet her?
God, I don't know.
Do you know who she was or anything?
Well, let me think. God, it's been a long time ago.
So here's one of the first times in the interview that we see her lying, right? And at this point, I'm sorry, she has to be wetting her pants, right? Because regardless if she thinks she got away with it or whatever, she knows that this is a person that She took their life, and she has gotten away with it for a long time. Now, I do think that Stephanie is kind of taking this approach of like, well, I'm just helping my fellow bros out here, kind of a vibe or whatever. But nonetheless, that's where they're first here. Well, God, it's been such a long time ago. But again, where she's like, well, I don't know if I met her. I'm like, honey, you would remember that. If you met somebody. I mean, we know that she clearly met her. She stalked her and took her life. But just in the realm of even lying to other officers, I'm just like, yeah, why would you even think that this would pass? But she wasn't prepared for it. They completely caught her off guard, and it shows.
I may have met her. Geez.
Yeah. Well, let me see. Let me ask you. You said you dated John. How long did you guys date?
I mean, are you guys, is this something, I mean, you said I was going to interview somebody about art and how you guys are,
Here's
I mean.
Stephanie, here's the situation. It's basically...
Oh yeah, all bets are off. She is in fact quite perturbed. She's like, you were supposed to be talking to me about art thievery, but now you're questioning me. I want to speak to the manager right now, please.
We knew that this, when we saw this in this chrono, that maybe, there was some relationship there. That's what the chrono seemed to indicate, and we didn't want to come up to you at your desk and ask those kinds of questions or do anything. You know how up there people can see what's going on if you go into an interview room or people are in there getting supplies.
Okay.
So we wanted to afford you some privacy, some confidentiality to talk about this, because we thought it might be, something, you're married to someone else, obviously, and so forth, and that you may not want to, talk about these things in that setting where someone, we don't want the rumor mill or gossip or any of that kind of stuff
I mean,
to start.
that's fine. I mean,
so we did this just as a means to try and speak to you in just a confidential place where where your business isn't out there for other people in your division to know about.
God, that's been a million years ago. I mean,
100%. At this point, she needed to be wearing some Depends, okay? You can just see the look on her face transitioning. That's one thing that makes this interview so interesting, is you're watching someone go through all this range of stuff, right? And part of that is this realization of, even before she gets arrested, that life is not going to ever be the same. Like, this whole thing of what do they know and da-da-da-da, and bringing all this up, life has to be flashing before her very eyes.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, because from what you're telling me, is you guys dated while you were in college together, right?
Yeah, and probably after college. I can't. Jeez.
I swear, if you were to play a drinking game with this video, and you can pick several things. Geez, could be one. Any reference to pictures, any reference to the flyer that she's going to mention in a few minutes, and you take a shot, and I swear you would probably die from alcohol poisoning.
We had long stopped, dating before that.
So you haven't talked to him for a long time?
Oh, I think I haven't talked to him in a long time. I couldn't even tell you when the last time I talked to him.
Now, another dynamic about this whole interrogation, especially knowing what we know about it, and that we probably need to just go ahead and figure out, is everyone's definition of the word dating. Okay. Now, I get that it is more socially acceptable to say dating instead of, hooking up, we'll say, right? But I can 100% tell you that the definition that she has of dating versus what John's definition is are two totally different things, unless we're just talking about straight up hooking up, right? But we know that's not the case with Stephanie. And on that note, let's actually dig a little bit deeper into the actual talks about her and John's relationship.
What ended the relationship between you and John?
It was kind of a weird relationship. I mean, we dated. I can't say that he was my boyfriend. I don't know that he would consider me his girlfriend.
So at least we see her being a little bit more realistic, right? A little bit more honest. But again, it's taken her years. She has a new life. She has a kid. She has a husband, right? She's moved on, one would hope. But this is a little bit more realistic of, I don't really consider him a boyfriend. Well, that's a lie, right? Of course she did. She just wanted to take his wife's life over him. So that's far from just somebody who you don't really consider someone that you love.
And once you guys split, were you guys still friends or kind of, problems?
I mean,
is it friendly, not friendly?
No, I don't think it was not friendly. I mean, we were friendly. I know that we went to Hawaii At one point,
Now, as we've seen, she was definitely harboring feelings for him. She loved this man. She wanted to be with him, and it ate her up that she couldn't be with him, and that also she didn't measure up to what maybe she perceived as his standards, right? Because he wouldn't even introduce her to his family as a girlfriend or whatever. It was literally just his friend with benefits. So when we see her here, where she's talking about oh, I guess we kind of did this, and oh, we went to Hawaii, wink wink. It just seems like there was this whole enigma, he was this enigma to her, right? And this back and forth and so on and so forth. But then you also have to sit here and think, okay, so she's at this point now where she has this new life. And again, I just wonder during this interrogation, this interview, if she's coming to this realization of, oh my God, what I have now is getting ready to be taken from me because of this. But another thing that we see her do in this is she starts eliciting all this random conversation about a friend who was sick and so on and so forth. I feel like she starts pulling from different things to be like, I'm trying to help y'all out as a coworker. Oh, I have a sick friend. That kind of thing.
another friend of mine who's actually dying right now, I'd have to check my pictures, or I'd say I'd ask Greg, but my friend Greg is dying of liver cancer right now.
Then the detectives move in for the hard-hitting questions.
Had you ever met his wife?
I may have.
Do you remember her name or anything, or? Or what she did for a living, or where she worked, or anything about her?
Well, I think I'm going to say that I think she was a nurse.
100% she is envisioning confronting her at the hospital, confronting her in her own living room, the snow ski thing, taking her life, all that. She is literally picturing this stuff, right? And she is going through so many hoops to make it look like, oh God, I think I did. Was she a nurse? I mean, I'm just like, this woman has absolutely no chill.
Man, I can't even remember how he said he met her. I mean, it's been so long ago.
Well, let me ask you, did you go to their wedding,
No, I didn't go to their wedding. No, did not go to their wedding. Couldn't even tell you what year he got married. I mean, it's been a million years ago.
Now, what she meant to say in this is, hell no, I was not invited to their wedding. Can you imagine? But it also makes me wonder if it was even a consideration for John. You know what I'm saying? I could almost feel should we invite her? But regardless, she's trying to play it off no, I was busy that day. I think I got an invite, but nope, it was a million years ago. And just in that one clip, how many times does she say a million years ago?
I don't understand why you're talking about some guy I dated a million years ago.
Well, do you know what happened to his wife?
Yeah, I know she got killed.
Now, she spit that out real quick, oh yeah, I know she got killed. And I'm just like, oh my God. I mean, again, she's envisioning those moments, when she's talking about it, and just trying to play it off so hard. When something happens, it's major adrenaline rush or something like that, and your face feels like it goes numb. I feel like that happened to her very early in this interrogation, but it was extra, and it was almost at a certain point her nervous system detached from her face, and everything was just running in two opposite directions.
What did you hear about that?
I saw a poster at work. I'm sure I spoke to him about it. I think I spoke to another friend of his about it.
And how did you first learn about that?
Jeez.
Now, personally, I would think this is the kind of response I would have thought to have heard from her if she was not guilty in all this. Yeah, you know what? I reached out to him to let him know, you know what? I want to help catch the person that did this. You know what I'm saying? I mean, she's an LAPD officer, for God's sakes, right? So this whole part of, I might have talked to him. I'm just yeah, honey, this is not. She's very lucky she had either people looking out for her and turning a blind eye when this originally happened, or helping cover it up, whatever it was, because these people saw right through all this.
And you think you said you thought his wife was a nurse. Do you have any idea where she was working at the time, or did he ever mention that to you? Was it a hospital or a doctor's office?
I'm sure he must have mentioned it. Now that you're bringing that up, I think she worked at a hospital somewhere. And yeah, I may have met her at a hospital. I may have talked to her once or twice.
At a hospital?
Or more.
But being that you're kind of...
Now we've gone from this like, oh, I think, I might know the wife and da-da-da-da-da to, well, I might have met her at the hospital, might have talked to her there a couple of times or more, or a few, or da-da-da. I'm just like, honey, please. One thing that surprises me about this is for a cop that got so many participation trophies, right, that she is still talking to these dudes at this point. Okay, she's been a cop, but she'll kind of throw out there like, yeah, gonna 26 years later, right? And I'm just like, honey, you should 100% at this point be like, what is going on? Why are you talking to me? Like, this is what's up. You know what I'm saying? But she like reverts back and forth to this. Why are we here? This was a million years ago. Let me pretend to try and help. It's very odd. And again, I think she's so caught off guard. It's like multiple systems in her. They ain't all working together no more.
You used to see John. Was it everything okay between you guys? I mean, there was never anything uncomfortable or anything between you and her?
I don't know. I mean, it's been so many years. I mean, uncomfortable. I mean, I can't even remember if we had a conversation. I mean, we may have. I may have seen her at his apartment. Geez, how many years ago was that? I don't even know what year she, got killed.
She's got me snorted. She's got me snorted. Yeah, this whole clip. Jeez, I mean, I just like forget, slap the cuffs on her and just end this right now.
Did you ever visit him and his wife?
No.
No? Never
No.
went out, get together, dinners, anything of that nature?
No.
She is so quick. No. We already know they're not inviting you over for dinner. You ain't that type, okay? John made that quite clear, right? And she don't want you in her house. Sherri didn't want you in that house. But nonetheless, she spits that out so quick. And again, at this point, I'm like, honey, do you not know they have evidence? Like, I would have gone with that. I don't remember. Like, at minimum, right? But she's still just like, she's going back and forth. It's just so interesting to me how much they caught her off guard. I mean, and thank God they did.
I don't think we ever socialized. He'd still call me. I can't say that I would. I mean, if he's married, I don't know that I would have called him. I mean, maybe. Who knows? I don't know. It's been a million years ago.
I love how now she acts all prim and proper. Like it would just be blasphemous to think of her calling this married man. I would love to know what John thought when he watched this interrogation, where she's like talking about like him. Well, he was married and all this. I'm just like, oh, honey, please, as if she wasn't calling and begging for his Oscar minor wiener.
But you're not sure where he moved to after he got married?
No idea. I mean,
never went over to visit him or
I don't think.
meet
I
his
mean, I
wife
don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I did.
She looks like a dog that got a hold of like one of those big bone things you can get at the pet store, and it's just what's that? And I mean, what's also just aside from her facial expressions, it's like. So this is the part where we were talking about earlier. Remember, John, they got married. John moved into Sherri's place, right? She knows she's been there. She broke into the damn place multiple times, right? Killed her, and one of them. Now, of course, she's not going to want to admit to that, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, again, she's been a cop for over 20 years. She should know that they know this stuff. And now there's a reason they're asking her this stuff, right? And it's so interesting to see how even a cop who's probably done these same techniques folds under this kind of pressure.
But you don't remember specifically ever going over to visit him or visit them and wherever he moved when he left Roscoe?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't think so. But
okay,
I don't want to say no. I don't think so. And then he says, "Oh yeah, she came over for something, dropped something off." I don't know.
So she 100% is remembering the ski situation there, right? Like she 100% knows that. She's covering her tracks. I'd be like, oh yeah, I remember I dropped my skis off and asked him to whack some real deep and hard.
After John's wife died, you said you may have been talking to him. Did your relationship start up again?
I would say no.
At this point, they're trolling her, okay? They are 100% trolling her. They know the answer to that question. They're like, we're going to really just cut her to the bone to see what she thinks. Because after all this, she ain't with him.
Do you know what the circumstances were regarding her death?
Geez, let me think back. Geez, I don't know if it was, if it was a burglary or something. Yeah, it's been so many years. I can faintly think that I may have saw a flyer.
Yeah.
May have had her picture on it. That's why I say, if somebody had called me, I may not have known what her last name was. I may have. Maybe if you told me, I would remember it.
Again, 1,000% she is remembering the day that she took Sherri's life. Period. End of damn story. She is sitting there doing that, acting completely. I think it was a burglary, and I'm just like, again, even if you take it out of context of like what we're watching here now, to sit here and think like, how do you not remember some of this stuff here? Even, you know what I'm saying? Like, even if it wasn't for take out the bad stuff that she did to Sherri, right? Or the stalking and all that. It's like, these are things, this is a significant person. You would remember some chunks of this, but it'd be like, I don't remember how that person died. Really? Really?
Do you remember the first name?
Shelly, Sherri.
She had to literally just throw that first name in there. Like, I think it was Shelly. Wait, Sherri. That's Sherri. I remember now. Sherri.
Do you remember ever talking to her?
Well, I said earlier, I may have, I may have talked to her.
You mentioned a hospital, maybe. You may have talked to her at a hospital.
Yeah, I may have, I'm thinking back now, you guys are bringing up all these old memories.
No, it kind of dusts off the cuff.
Geez.
She is getting completely flustered here. Now look, now that y'all are bringing up all this stuff, I do remember dressing up like a tard and going to the hospital and saying I'd take her man. I don't know how I forgot about that. Come on, okay? This is the part where I'm like, just slap the damn cuffs on her and be done with it. Seriously. So, but you can tell she's getting strained because they're putting the pressure on. She is in, I'm trying to honestly sit here and imagine what it would be like to be in her situation right now, where you're sitting in this thing. She has to know what's coming down the pipeline, right? She can't be this stupid, but maybe she is. And I don't think it's that she's stupid, but she just 100% thinks she got away with this. And now, thank God, it's turning out to be different.
At one point, he may have been dating her, or I don't know, maybe he was married. I don't even remember. And I'm like, why are you calling me if you're either dating her or living with her or married to her? Because I honestly don't remember the time frame. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, come on, knock it off. And now I'm thinking I may have gone to her and say, hey, you know what? Is he dating you? He's bothering me. And so I'm thinking that we had a conversation about that. One or two, maybe. It could have been three. I don't want to say I had 3 conversations with her.
Like at her work or at their house or.
No, I'm thinking that he obviously must have told me where she worked. I'm thinking it was a hospital somewhere in L.A. And I could have been. Again, what year was that? Where was I working?
That last picture of her face again, she is just melting down. Look at the deterioration, right? So now she's saying, yeah, you know what, I might have had this conversation. I might have, he's sitting here contacting me. And again, I would love to know his reaction to this. Because she's sitting here trying to pin it on him. And I'm just like, honey, you were begging him for it. And so then the audacity of her to sit here and play it off like she went to Sherri to tell her what her man was doing. Tell your man to knock it off. He's contacting me and yada, yada, yada. And I'm just like, oh, come on. These detectives are doing such a great job because they are so even kill. Like, they have the DNA. They know all this stuff already, right? And they are just being so about it, because it's angering to watch. I mean, how this is like from 2009, right? I mean, I'm not even personally involved with these people, and it's angering to watch, but knowing the truth on our side, right? So kudos to them.
When you said like, hey, you know, he's calling me, he needs to knock it off or what have you. I mean, was that civil? Was there? I mean,
Oh,
did
yeah,
it?
no, there was not. I don't think there was anything. If the conversation lasted a few minutes, I can't even remember. And what is it like? You know, we went out to lunch or anything.
Right, but there was no like arguments or fights, or
don't think
it didn't
so.
get heated or anything like
Not that I recall. No, I mean,
No, not that I recall, no. I mean, and again, I keep going back to this, but it's so clear at this point what she doesn't realize that it looks like, I mean, at least to me, I'm sure these detectives, I mean, now she's sitting here, remember the conversation, she remembers there was no argument, it was civil according to her, which we know is a lie, right? So her selective memory during this, it's just that facade is all gone. Now, of course, they know this, right? That's clear for them to see. She is probably completely numb with adrenaline. Like, it has to be going through her mind that her life is over with.
So you didn't have any problems with her then? You didn't have any
No.
issues with her?
no, I mean,
But let me ask you. It seems like you didn't have any issue. Now, did she have an issue with you as far as because now you're telling her, hey, you know, tell him to stop calling. Now, you know, she's like, hey, you know, you figure she'd be threatened by you.
you know, I don't know. I mean,
I don't know. I mean, geez, I don't know. I cannot with these facial expressions, right? But no issues with me. She liked me coming around, stalking her, showing up to the gym, all that kind of stuff. I'm just like, really? So, but I mean, of course, Stephanie's gonna lie about this, right?
you know, maybe the hospital was on my way to work in Hollywood. I mean, that's kind of sounding familiar.
Would you have gone on duty?
Oh, no, I'm sure I wouldn't have.
No.
I'm pretty good about not doing stuff.
Oh.
You know, I mean, no, I'm not saying that, you know, you haven't done stuff on duty, but I would have, I mean, I would have been working with somebody,
Oh, yeah.
you know, so.
Now, the funny thing about this is, like, not only is she lying about this stuff, but she's like, oh, no, I was real good about doing that. Don't do stuff on duty. You know, and it's just like, honey, you literally left a diary talking about visiting friends, going grocery shopping, picking oranges, crazy stuff. Everything but being a cop, right? This is what she was doing while she was on duty. So it's just funny that she takes this high road, but of course, at this point, this is what she would do.
I mean, that's sounding familiar. I mean, that's, now that you guys are bringing this stuff up, I mean, that sounds familiar. But again, I mean, you know, what's this got to do with me dating him and, you know, her getting killed? I mean, I don't, you know, I don't have anything to do with it. And you got something that's, somebody said, you know, whatever. I mean,
now you see how she slid that in there of, I don't have anything to do with it. I mean, you got something, somebody says, you know, she is freaking out. And total fishing expedition, right? Total fishing expedition. And she'll do this throughout this interview. Because at this point, again, like I said, she knows, right? She knows that something, she's trying to figure out what they know. And she's dotting her answers along the way. But again, her facial expressions just instantly give her away.
Let me ask you, did the detectives ever reach out to you?
no one's ever talked to me. I don't think anybody ever talked to me about him.
It seems like back then
you know,
would have been.
well, I take.
Now this is the part that's just a slap in the damn face, right? After all that her parents said, John said, regardless of when it was said, whatever. Looking to Sherri, you know, ex-girlfriend, da-da-da. And now we sit here years later, and Stephanie's sitting here saying, no one ever did. She looks just as surprised. You know, like she was expecting them to have talked to her. You know, again, if this is true, we don't know, right? But regardless, it does seem to fit the narrative that nobody was really willing to even consider that she or an ex, you know, whoever this, you know, ex-LAPD girlfriend was, had something to do with it.
Well, after he hooked up with Sherri, do you know where they were living?
No, you asked me that already.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, obviously they were living in Van Nuys division.
Yeah.
I may have known.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did he ever give me the address? Maybe.
Now, it's interesting to see how cocky she is in calling them out, right? To where she's just like, you already asked me that. Like, she called them, right? And again, this is where it's just becoming more clear, this cat and mouse dynamic, because she knows she's 100% like, somebody is on to me. this vibe is going on, that whole 9 yards. But again, it's just this whole cockiness of it that's just very alarming to watch. But now we also need to discuss this last pack.
So as far as for social events or
Excuse
anything,
me.
I mean, it's...
Yeah, she burps throughout this, and she's just like, yeah, boys, y'all don't mind, I'm going to kick my shoes off, get comfy, and let one rip.
Regarding this issue with John, to, kind of like, hey, what's going to happen here with this thing? But would this ever have followed up to her house when you went to talk to her to say, hey, you know what?
I don't even know that I knew where they lived. That's what I'm saying. If I knew where they lived and I'd been there, if it was for something social, I would, and I can't see how many times I saw her face to face. He lived on Roscoe. Did I ever see her there? I don't know. I mean, I may have seen her at his apartment on Roscoe.
Now you can tell that they're tightening the screws on her, right? And she's, again, getting kind of frustrated with it, but also not wanting to show her cards. But unfortunately for her, lucky for Sherri, she's already done this because they've already worn her down to admitting things before, right? So they know, and she should know that they know she's withholding information. You know what I'm saying? So they're going to keep doing this, though.
But you didn't have any issues with her, right?
No, I mean, obviously, if he was dating me and dating her, I probably said, hey, pick or something,
Fair.
back
That's
then.
So again, just like I said, the more they wear her down, the more stuff comes out about her story. So now it's, well, I mean, I might have told him to pick one of us. And this is my thing. I'm like, honey, she's the one married to him, okay? He done picked her, okay? And it won't her. That's just where I'm like, honey, he did that. He moved on. He tried to. This is that. But then can we also just talk about the last facial expression she made? Imagine how scary she would be dealing with her as like a citizen. Like, say she pulled you over. God forbid she was arresting you something for major. I bet she is scary as hell. You know what I'm saying? Like, I bet that she had this like completely like evil aspect to her.
What else to tell you?
Well, one of the concerns I had is looking at some of the notes is some of Sherri's friends said that you and her were having a problem because of the John situation.
Well, number one, I don't know who her friends are, because again, I don't recall if he did tell me where he met her. I don't know even who these friends are. A problem.
Yeah, this is the part that literally almost took me out when I was not feeling good in bed. the facial gymnastics of that part. I don't know who these friends are. So, I mean, first of all, you saw when he first said that, she got real serious, like, well, who said what? She knew they were going over the kill or whatever. And so now, and they are, right? They're getting closer of, well, this is what people are saying. You know what I mean? Like, we've been asking you all this stuff. We've been beating around the bush. Here it is. People are saying that you had a problem with her. And she's just so dumbfounded by this.
I mean, you guys talked, but it wasn't, from what you recall, confrontational from either side?
I mean, I'm trying to, turn my memory back, and I'm trying. I can't even picture the conversation. I mean, I can't even picture the conversation.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, at the hospital, it never got to the point where people were going, hey, everybody go to your own corner type of thing?
I don't think so.
Nothing like that?
I don't think so.
I'm just trying to get out of my memory. Trying to reel it back. I mean, y'all, it's psychologically, and again, I ain't no doctor, I ain't no lawyer, any of that stuff, but just, psych, when I went over here, it's fascinating to see the meltdown she's having, right? And again, this whole thing, I don't think so. And it's like, honey, you keep remembering this stuff, right? She knows. And they know that she knows. That's what's also fascinating. But just the other layer to it is the fact that she's a cop.
Yeah, because I guess basically what I'm asking is, were you ever welcome to the house? Like, hey.
Oh, come over?
Yeah, come on over. We're having a barbecue, a dinner party, Christmas party, whatever.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think.
I mean, this part. sorry, y'all. For a second, I thought she was seizing. Okay, I was like, were they like, honey, are you okay? Are you frozen? You know how the whole thing of when you're young, it's like, if you make a face like that, your face is gonna stay stuck. I mean, this is a prime damn example. But again, these questions, you know, they had to be just cutting her to the bone. You know, like they didn't even want to have you over for a barbecue. Now, another thing that is interesting too is her absolute chokehold throughout this interview on taking pictures.
You know, it's been, I'd have to almost go back and look at pictures, because I take pictures. I mean, I usually, when I go to functions, I have 10,000 pictures, okay? I'm a picture nut.
Can you imagine her if she got a hold of Instagram? I mean, can you imagine? God only knows with Facebook. Did they have Facebook back then? I don't think they did. 2009, did they? Maybe so. I don't know. I think they did. Regardless, can you imagine? Okay, so now remember the part that we talked about where she had the backup gun and she reported it stolen and the whole 9 yards, and that was the murder weapon and all that. Let's see what they say about that.
I had a gun that was stolen. I had other stuff that was stolen.
Not your duty gun, was it?
No.
Oh, that's good. Was it ever recovered?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. Not that I know of.
Never been notified?
No.
Now, you know, right there, she was like, oh my God, what if they have the murder weapon? What if they have the murder weapon, right? Because she's like, I hope it wasn't recovered. It's in the bottom of the ocean right now. That's what she's really thinking. Another thing that's frustrating with that part is the detectives will say that all that information was readily in the file, whatever. That she had reported this gun missing. It was a .38. That was the same type of weapon used in the crime. So, I mean, again, these are the things that were overlooked, whether purposely or unintentionally, we don't know. But they were right there for whoever wanted to see them.
Where did that happen when your gun was taken?
Trying to remember. I'm sure you guys must know.
Now, the way she slides that last part in there of, I'm sure you guys must know. So, again, she knows she's tinkering with them, right? She's playing cat and mouse. She's fishing for what they know, but she's also just trying to be cocky. You know, oh, I'm sure you guys know. I mean, why even say that? Especially when you know you're guilty, right? I mean, it's just, and it's very interesting to see. I would love to know what she's going through in her mind right now to try and play all this off. Like, is that what she's thinking she's still able to do?
And this is an incident where you showed up. You weren't supposed to show up. And things got heated.
At his house?
Yeah.
That just doesn't sound familiar. I mean,
Nothing.
So now all bets are off. They're going in for the kill. They've got her corner. She's backed into the corner. Whole 9 yards. I swear to God, I think it's her face is gonna try to escape first.
Did you ever fight with her?
You mean like we fought?
Yeah. Did you ever duke it out with her?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
You'd remember that, right? That would be pretty.
yeah, I would think so. I
Pretty
mean,
specific,
Yeah, like I said, I mean,
traumatic.
obviously, it just doesn't sound familiar. I mean, what are they saying? So I fought with her. So now I'm getting the jump, the leap. Excuse me, I haven't eaten. They're saying, okay, I fought with her, so I must have killed her.
Yeah, basically, because that's essentially what happened, right? So, again, she had to let one rip real quick. She's getting a little excited. Thank God it didn't come out of the other end. But on the same note here, I'm just like, she 100% knows that she's been found out, right? Like, she knows that somebody has talked and all this stuff and da-da-da-da-da. So many years later, right? That's what makes it so interesting and so satisfying.
So you, offhand, you don't recall ever going into her house and having words and physically,
No.
attacking her attacking you?
No.
Nothing like that?
No. I mean, that's no.
No. They're just warming her up for the grand finale here, y'all. Okay, they are priming her. She is primed, and they are ready to pounce.
As they processed everything, they did the best they could at that time, and they looked at a lot of people and different things in this case. And you're right.
I mean, if you guys are claiming that I'm a suspect, then, I got a problem with that.
Okay.
Okay? So, if you're doing this as an interrogation, you're saying, hey, I'm a suspect. Well, now I got a problem with, now you're accusing me of this. Is that what you're saying?
Again, yeah, you're totally a suspect, honey. Maybe this deep into the interview is probably the wrong time to be saying those words, but I mean, come on.
I mean, how would you guys like it if the tables were turned on you?
I understand. No.
No, that's what we're telling you. I mean, you're free to go whenever you want. If this makes you uncomfortable and you want to,
now you're starting to make me uncomfortable.
Like, at this point, she became uncomfortable. I'm just like, are you serious? Like, it took this long. Again, the fact that she's a cop, I mean, my God, come on. But then also, look at how condescending and cocky she is. Well, how would y'all like it if the tables were turned? And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, you know you killed the woman? I mean, you're sitting here envisioning this. Like, it blows my mind.
You know, if we asked you for a DNA swab, would you be willing to give us one?
Maybe. Because now I'm thinking I probably need to talk to a lawyer.
Okay.
I mean,
well,
because I know how this stuff works. Okay, don't get me wrong. You're right. I have been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And I wish I had been recording this because now it sounds like there's you're selling these people say I'm fighting with her, and now it sounds like you're trying to I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah,
we know.
Okay. And now it almost sounds like you're trying to pin something on me.
She's been doing this for a long time. Now I do need a lawyer. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? Again, these guys did such a great job at walking her into this. Now, of course, she doesn't know at this point. They already got your DNA, you filthy animal.
It's possible we may have some DNA at the location.
That's great.
Right then and there is where she did a number 1 and 2 at the same time. Okay, she is done. Her britches are finished.
I mean, I'm shocked. I'm really shocked that somebody would be saying that I did this. I mean, we had a fight, and so I went and killed her. I mean, come on.
Well,
yeah, we're shocked too, honey. Okay, shocked that you got away with it for so long.
Okay. All right.
Well, thanks for giving me the courtesy. I wish I recorded it.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Stephanie, take care.
All right.
Now this is where her day's about to get really crappy. Now notice if you heard her side that in, like, thanks for the courtesy, I should have tape recorded this. And I'm like, oh girl, don't worry. They got your ass covered.
This is absolutely crazy.
Have a seat, Stephanie.
This is insane.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. Stephanie, you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand?
Yes.
Anything you say may be used against you in court. Do you understand?
Yes.
You have the right to the presence of an attorney before and during any questioning. Do you understand?
Yes.
If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you free of charge before any questioning if you want. Do you understand?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us right now?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
This is crazy.
Okay.
This is I'm like in shock. I'm totally in shock.
Even right up to the bitter end, she lies, denies, and never cries. So yes, unfortunately for Miss Stephanie, things didn't quite go as planned that day for her. But don't worry, that's not the last we'll see of those crazy eyes.
Good afternoon. I understand you have reached a verdict in this matter, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, please provide the verdict to the bailiff.
People of the State of California versus Stephanie Eileen Lazarus. Case number BA 357423. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Stephanie Eileen Lazarus, guilty of the crime of murder of Sherri Rasmussen in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony, as charged in Count 1 of the information.
In March 2012, Stephanie Lazarus was convicted of the murder of Sherri Rasmussen. She was sentenced to 27 years. Now, she would eventually appeal the conviction. She said that the search warrant that they used for her journal, where she talked about John and all that kind of stuff, that it was improperly granted. Now, another really hard pill to swallow for this case is the fact that, first of all, she was allowed to retire, like after this took place, after the arrest and all that kind of stuff took place, right? So she was allowed to retire, and she gets her retirement, her pension, to the tune of almost $65,000 a year. Now, Sherri's parents would go on to sue the LAPD as well as Stephanie. And let's be very clear on this part. They were not doing this for money. They were not doing this for any of that. They wanted accountability and they wanted answers, right? So they already have money, right? They didn't need their money. So They did that. They wanted accountability. They wanted answers. Now, they would not be able to follow through with suing the LAPD and went to the Supreme Court of California, and they were like, we're not going to uphold this. That never went through. However, they did end up getting a judgment with Stephanie. I believe it was like $10 million. Now, Stephanie, of course, has appealed this and whatnot. Now, Stephanie is sitting in an institution for women in California. She obviously is still claiming her innocence. She will be able to go up for parole. Do I think she'll ever get out personally? I don't think so. I can't imagine. And she might very well, die of natural causes before that ever happens. You know what I'm saying? She wasn't young when she went in there. So we'll see. Now, here's some of my thoughts on this. Do I think it was a cover-up? I think that a lot of people looked in a lot of different ways. I think that it was very early decided that this was going to be a certain thing. It was two robbers. Another thing that took place is Stephanie worked in some of these precincts, these districts, where the files were kept for this. So when they started going through this, they were seeing that some stuff was missing. I 100% think Stephanie gained access to some of the evidence and got rid of it. Again, I 100% think that Sherri's determination stuck with her even in wherever she went after this life and spoke from the grave. I mean, that whole thing about the swab being lost for 18 years, I mean, come on. You know what I'm saying? And so that's one of the things that, again, I hate that Sherri lost her life in this, but the silver lining, I guess you could say, is that she was able to come back and get justice. And even though Stephanie 100% probably, I got away with this, I have a new life, the woman who in her world took her man from her also took her new life from her. And for me, that is just poetic justice. So again, my heart goes out to Sherri's family, her loved ones, her friends, all these people that had the blessing and grace to know this wonderful woman. I really appreciate everybody sitting here hanging out with me, watching this. I'll be coming up with some new things soon, so just stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe. And until we gather back around for this sofa with this little doggy, I'll see y'all next time.